Hello, everyone. So, welcome to another episode of Smart Outsourcing Talks. And today I'm honored to introduce a standout leader in the world of accounting and finance, Terrell Turner. Terrell, welcome to the
Thank you for
show.
having me. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, let me first introduce you before we get started. Though a lot of people already know you a lot, right, through your podcast and channel. But folks, Terrell is a managing partner of TLTurner Group, a firm that has earned a national recognition for delivering forward-thinking accounting and CFO services, particularly to the law firms. His approach focuses on simplifying complex financial concepts and helping clients turn insights into action. He is not only a two-time 40 under 40 award winner, but also has been named as a top 20 global finance influencer, a testament to impact he is making across the profession. Terrell is also creator and the host of the Finance and Accounting Show, where he demystifies finance for business owners and law firm in special. A podcast specifically helping legal professionals to get more strategic with their numbers. He's a sought after speaker and serves as the chair of law firm finance committee within American Bar Association's law practice division, where it's running a fast growing firm, creating a valuable content or mentoring professionals. Terrell is consistently raising the bar. Terrell, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Hey, thank you for having me and such a great introduction. I feel flattered, so thank you.
Okay, Terrell. So let us begin with a little about your journey. So how you got started, and then before to TL Turner Group, what you were into.
Yeah, so I would say probably like a lot of accountants, I went to school, graduated from school, went into public accounting, became a CPA, and in my time in public accounting, I realized that doing audit wasn't really the best, path for me forward. I
Mm,
enjoyed the experience, but I felt like when I was doing auditing, you were on the
mm,
outside looking in, kind of telling
mm,
people what they did wrong and giving
mm,
limited advice. But I wanted to
mm,
actually be part of the team that's like, how do I help them actually make decisions and help drive
mm,
execution? So I left public accounting, started working in corporate accounting and finance, and I
mm,
did that and
mm,
was fortunate to work for some global companies, Fortune 100 companies, and
mm.
there's where I got a chance to really work with a lot of non-finance professionals. And part of my
Okay.
job was
Mm,
explaining the finance and accounting, making it simpler for them.
mm,
And I got a lot of great global experience from, managing teams in India, Singapore.
mm,
I
mm.
moved down and lived in Brazil for a period of time of working with
Oh,
the
wow.
finance team there. So I got a
Mm,
really good chance to see finance and accounting
mm,
from so
mm,
many different perspectives and to see it how it's done around the world. And
mm,
after doing that for several years, I finally decided like it's like what if I took my skills and I started helping, mid-market and small businesses really
mm,
understand how to use
mm,
finance to make decisions. And that's what
mm,
led me to, leaving my corporate career and then starting my own accounting firm of how do I bring that skill set, all the things I've
mm.
learned from the Fortune 100 companies, and how do I bring it down to the mid market and small businesses?
Oh, that's great. And when did you start this firm?
So we started the firm April 1st of 2020.
Oh, wow. It's just 5 years, huh?
Yeah,
But
we are
but
a
you are
pretty
known
young
everywhere,
company.
Yeah, you are young, but you are known, So yeah, that's great. And why did you choose legal firms to help? So was there any previous background to that?
Absolutely not. There were no prior experience with legal, and I think probably like most people, when you start a firm, you're
Hmm,
just like, hey, whoever will pay me
hmm,
will take you on
hmm,
as a client,
hmm,
and
hmm,
that's what we were doing. And I think over time, what I started to realize is, all right, if we had a focus area, we could probably do a better job at marketing And so at first, we tested it with different industries. We first tested it with restaurants because back in 2020, when we started, a lot of
mm,
restaurants were trying to get grant funding and because of
mm,
COVID. And I was like, okay, we could help with that. And we filled in the gap. But I think as
mm,
we started to learn about the business cycle for restaurants, we realized
mm,
we weren't
mm,
really the best fit for it. And
mm,
so we started looking at what other industries could we understand, develop some processes, and what industry could we actually add the most value for? And we looked at
mm,
several industries, and I had done some consulting for a couple of law firms, and
mm.
I noticed that law firms were very familiar with like our accounting firm model because their business operates very similar. So
Right.
after I started, connecting with law firms and doing, speaking engagements or presentations on
Mm,
finance for law firms, I realized
mm,
that was the
mm,
right industry for us. And it took us about 3.5
mm,
years to
mm.
really, come to settle on accounting firms. So we were probably 3.5 years old before we fully, settled in on law firms.
Okay. And so when you started, like, what were your challenges? So maybe in the year one, or when you were just about to start.
Yeah, so I would say year one was how do we get clients? That was our biggest issue because,
Mm,
we started, like I said, I started April 1st, and,
mm,
where I am in North Carolina in the US, you know,
mm.
April was around the time where, things started shutting down due to the, COVID-19
Right.
pandemic.
Mm,
And
mm,
at that point, I had talked to a couple of, accounting firm owners in my
mm,
city. And
mm,
before I started the firm and asked them, like, how do you go about, finding clients? And the advice a lot of them gave me was, oh, you go to networking events, shake hands, and, meet people. And so when everything started shutting down as a result of COVID, it's like, I
mm,
can't use any of the strategies that they recommended because no
mm,
one's getting together in person.
mm,
It's actually not good to shake hands at this time.
mm.
And so so it was a very interesting hurdle because I had to figure out, okay, how are we going to let people know that we're open for business because we're a
Mm,
new accounting firm.
mm,
Everybody's trying to figure out what to do next. And,
mm.
a lot of people are trying not to spend as much money because in the early
Sure.
days of COVID-19, we didn't know
Mm,
how long this
mm,
was going to last. And so for
mm,
me, the biggest challenge was how do you get the word out about your business and how do you get clients? And I
mm,
think that
mm,
that's what really made me have to think outside of the box and say, all right, I got to get very
mm,
creative about how do we
mm.
get the word out about what we're doing so that we can
Mm.
start to get clients.
Sure. And what triggered, so what worked for you in terms of,
Yes.
marketing or sales strategy?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that worked for me was I think of being humble enough to admit I didn't know what I was doing when it came down to sales and marketing. And so
Mm,
what I focused on is what if I created a podcast
mm,
and I interviewed people who knew more than I did, and
mm,
I could ask them questions and I could learn from them while at the
mm,
same time giving them a
mm,
platform to share their story. And
mm,
so I just went, all in on creating content to where I think in that first year, like from
mm,
April to December, I
mm.
did about 250 interviews of
Oh, wow,
interviewing.
that's a lot.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
a lot, but I would
yeah.
say it really gave me a chance to learn from
Mm,
other people,
mm,
and I
mm,
think in that process, I learned
mm,
so much about what other people were doing, like, if I was
mm.
trying to figure out, like, how do I understand marketing? I
Mm.
interviewed people who were marketing experts as guests on
Okay.
the show,
Mm,
and
mm,
I would just ask them questions, and so
mm,
there's
mm,
about maybe, 25 interviews that I did specifically
mm,
on the topic of marketing. And
mm.
I was using the podcast as like my
Coaching.
university for entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that's pretty smart move. You don't have to go to the university. University comes to you, and you don't have to pay for it. And people thank you for being invited.
And I mean, it worked out great because it gave,
Yeah. Hmm.
people a chance to, get introduced to who I was because, a
Right.
lot of business owners, they were
Hmm.
interested in when I talked to, a tax strategist, they were
Hmm.
interested in learning more about, hey, I wanted to
Hmm.
listen to what the tax strategist was saying. Or when I interviewed marketing professionals, they wanted to
Hmm.
listen to, hey, what were the tips that they were sharing? And
Sure.
the good thing
Hmm.
is, on every one all 250 interviews, they kept
Hmm.
seeing my face on the video, and then you started having people reach out like, "Well, hey, well,
Yeah.
what do you do?" Because people for a while, people thought all I did was podcast.
So how this podcast converted into business? So mostly it was incoming leads, or how did you reach out to your prospects?
Yeah, so it was mostly incoming leads,
Hmm.
because after we got to around, like, 200 episodes, I was like, okay, all right.
Hmm.
I was like, I need to start doing some finance videos. So,
Okay.
we would release, an interview
Hmm.
episode, and then I would do like a
Hmm.
2-minute video
Hmm.
explaining a finance
Hmm.
concept. And I think
Hmm.
as people started
Sure.
seeing more of those finance
Yeah.
concept
Hmm.
videos, they
Hmm.
were like,
Hmm.
hey, we need some help understanding our profit and loss statement, or we need some help,
Hmm.
actually
Hmm.
with bookkeeping. And that's how we started to get our leads is people
Hmm.
started seeing our content and then asking
Hmm.
us like, "Hey, do you
Hmm.
know anybody that can help?" Because, what's
Okay.
funny is that people
Hmm.
thought that I was just a podcast host. And so some people would reach out and say, "Hey, do you know an accountant that can help us with this?" Yes, us.
You would say yes. You would say yes. Contact Terrell.
So I would just say, "Yeah, I know the perfect person who can help you with that. Me."
That's great. And Terrell, in your experience, okay, so a lot of firm owners I see that they are in a kind of a fix, whether to be a generic firm or create a niche. So, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I would say I think, if you're really going to step in to take marketing very serious, I think creating
Hmm.
a niche is
Hmm.
definitely what I would recommend
Hmm.
because it is very difficult
Hmm.
to go out and tell people, yeah, we help everybody because people
Hmm.
just aren't going to remember that.
Yeah.
Now,
Hmm.
when we started being more clear and it's like, hey, we
Hmm.
specialize in helping law firms, what we
Hmm.
started to see happen is even
Hmm.
other accounting firms were
Hmm.
sending us referrals and sending us
Wow.
leads, or
Hmm.
other people who worked with lawyers would say, "Hey, if you're a
Hmm.
law firm and you need help, like you should talk to Terrell." And
Hmm.
when we started to really focus our message, we started noticing like we were getting referrals from different places, and I think
Hmm.
it was a great thing for us because we don't do any tax work. We just do
Okay.
bookkeeping and CFO work.
Sure.
Now,
Oh,
I
wow.
would say for
Hmm.
people who
Hmm.
do tax work,
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
you have the luxury of being a little bit broader because I think
Hmm.
the topic of tax, I think, is
Hmm.
clear enough in the minds of
Hmm.
people. They know that, hey, around April
Sure.
15th,
Hmm.
March
Hmm.
15th, April 15th,
Hmm.
everybody needs tax work. And so I think
Yeah.
if you're doing a type of service that has
Hmm.
kind of a more public reputation, like, you know, people are more familiar with getting their taxes done than they are with getting their
Hmm.
bookkeeping done. And I
Hmm.
think people are starting to become a little bit more familiar with CFO services,
Hmm.
but the reality is tax is the most popular thing that accountants do.
Sure.
So for
Yeah.
us, I would say since we were focused on bookkeeping and CFO
Hmm.
work, I think
Hmm.
us being more focused on who we
Hmm.
wanted to do business with was better.
Hmm.
Now, when I
Sure.
talk to people who do a lot of tax work, I would say is
Hmm.
you don't necessarily have to be as specific. Like you don't have to be the tax person for startups
Hmm.
or the tax
Hmm.
person for
Sure.
law firms. Like you have
Hmm.
the luxury of being a little bit
Yeah.
broader. But
Yeah.
I do think as you're starting to grow in the scale, I think
Hmm.
being a little bit more clear about who you work with, and even
Hmm.
if that's not just specifically of, hey, I work with this specific industry, but more so
Hmm.
of, hey, we work with businesses between,
Sure.
2 to 15 million
Yeah.
dollars in
Hmm.
revenue. Having
Sure.
some type of clarity about what
Yeah.
does your ideal client look like, I think is
Right.
always helpful.
Right. Great. Yeah. Now I see that, since all the accountants are burning midnight oil during the tax season, you are busy climbing mountains.
That is very
I
true.
saw your I saw your LinkedIn post. During the tax season, you are trekking, you are cycling, you are climbing mountain.
You know, I would say it's something that I learned over time. I didn't realize it when we started the firm of like by focusing on bookkeeping and CFO and not doing tax work is that it
Hmm.
put us in a position to do
Hmm.
some amazing marketing because
Hmm.
during tax season, most
Hmm.
other accountants are heads down trying to get through
Hmm.
tax returns. And
Hmm.
so what we realize is while all the
Hmm.
other accountants, or let's say, while 60% of all accountants are heads down trying to get taxes done, we can
Hmm.
go out and do cool things and actually
Yeah.
market and brand ourselves and get
Right.
even more recognition
Right.
because we're one of the very few accountants who are actually creating content during tax season.
Yeah.
And I think, for for us, it just became like, wow, that was a great marketing strategy. Now, I wish I could take credit and say, hey, we planned it that way, but it kind of happened that way. And we
It
were
just
just like,
happened.
hey,
Yeah.
let's just
Mm.
use it.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Yeah. And if it's not confidential, may I ask, how many clients you have and whether all these are only legal firm that you work with now?
Yeah, so I would say I would say we've historically had about between I would say 28 to 35 clients.
Hmm.
We've had some clients that we offboarded just because it didn't make sense for us to continue supporting them.
Hmm.
And then I would say about, 2 weeks ago, we just closed the deal with with a couple big deals to actually onboard 18 more clients over the
Oh,
next,
wow.
3
Hmm.
months. And so
Okay.
we're growing rapidly because
Hmm.
I think at one point I would say we were on a pace to continue growing and
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
intentionally slowed things down
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
we actually offboarded some clients about a year
Hmm.
ago because I
Hmm.
wanted to test this strategy of if we
Hmm.
went a little more high end and
Hmm.
at the same time,
Hmm.
if I really focused on how do
Hmm.
we fix our sales process to make it a
Hmm.
little bit more sales on demand as opposed to waiting for the phone to ring. So the
Hmm.
18 clients that we're,
Hmm.
onboarding
Hmm.
over the next, couple months is a
Hmm.
product of like a year of just really working on our sales process. So
Hmm.
we're going to 40 plus clients and I think
Hmm.
we have a path to continue growing at an aggressive pace.
Yeah, and this is like adding 80% in just in one quarter, right? So that's a big. So so when you are growing at this pace, what do you do to avoid a kind of a burnout you have?
Yeah, so I think that one was something we had to be
Because
strategic about.
yeah, so people burn out in the tax season, and you burn
Mhm.
out just because of you are having so many clients scaling fast.
Yeah, so I think it was something we had to be strategic about because I think,
Mm,
probably after we got over figuring out how to get clients and figuring out
mm,
like our sales process, I think the next
mm,
thing in our journey was okay, how do you get the work done? And I think
mm,
that's where we started hiring and we started,
mm,
hiring, team members offshore. And I think
mm,
probably about a year and a half to 2 years ago is where I
mm, mm,
realized like, if we keep
mm,
growing, I'm going to burn out. And so
mm,
I really shifted my attention to say, how can I work with my
mm,
offshore contractors and my offshore staff to really
mm,
get them more confident and up to speed
mm,
so that I
mm,
can take some of my hands off of some of the work
mm,
and I can let
mm,
them independently
mm,
perform. And
mm,
so for us, one of the big things I do now as we're onboarding that many clients, like the way that
mm,
I don't burn out is
mm.
I don't do a lot of the accounting, the detailed accounting work anymore. We
Okay.
have bookkeepers, senior accountants,
Mm,
we have an accounting manager. So
mm,
they're doing a lot of the details. And so how
mm,
I protect them from burning out is
mm,
we're constantly assessing what does realistic capacity look like, and
mm.
we're making decisions about hiring the next bookkeeper or hiring the next accountant before
Sure.
we actually need them so that we
Okay.
don't get any one person over capacity and then they burn
Mm.
out.
Oh, wow. And how many offshore team members you have?
So right now we have eight in the Philippines, and we have one content writer in Kenya.
Yeah. And how many staff in US?
We have so there's myself and then one other staff member in the US.
Oh, wow. This is unheard of, So you are pretty much, pretty much, powered by the offshore teams. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's something that we really leaned into. And I know that
Mm,
there's a lot of firms that I met that were
mm,
hesitant
mm,
about going with an
mm,
offshore team. A
mm,
lot of the people that I talked to early on, they just didn't feel as comfortable with the offshore team. And the unique
mm,
thing for me is prior to
mm,
starting this firm, I worked for
mm.
global corporations. And
Yeah.
I
Okay. That gave you
remember
experience.
moving
Yeah.
down to
Mm,
Brazil and
mm,
working with the
mm,
finance team in Brazil. I
mm,
remember
mm,
working with my accounting team in India
mm,
or working with my
mm,
accounting team in Singapore. So it's like I had
mm,
experienced it and I
mm,
already knew like working with an
mm,
offshore team can really
mm,
work if you're
mm,
willing to adjust your approach to leadership, and but
mm,
you can really make it work. And so I decided, hey,
mm,
we're going to lean very heavy into an
mm.
offshore strategy.
Yeah, and this is pretty interesting. I've been interviewing a lot of people and meeting a lot of people. I haven't seen that somebody who has done like 90% of the staff is offshore, right? So I'm
Mm.
really interested to know more about that. So when you started, like of course you had a background of working with the offshore team, um, but having 90% team members as an offshore, you never had any kind of an apprehensions or how it will work out, or what are the initial challenges that you faced?
Yeah, I think some of the initial challenges are, I think, you know, culturally understanding the culture of the team, because I think
Mm,
that's one of the first issues that people
mm,
tend to overlook is what
mm,
is the work culture of the
mm,
environment of,
mm,
your staff. Because if you're
mm,
trying to build a culture in your organization, it's a
mm,
little easier in the US because inherently we become a bit more familiar with what goes on in the US because we probably worked in US companies, we know the
mm.
environment. But when you
Right.
start hiring people in other countries, you do
Mm,
have to put forth a little more effort. Like I think
mm,
back to my time when I moved down to, Brazil was my
mm,
first experience with it of, there, if you don't have a good personal relationship with people, like they don't like you personally,
mm,
they just don't
mm.
cooperate well with you. And so
Okay.
I had to
Mm,
learn that that's very different about that culture. And so
mm,
when it
mm,
came to me hiring people offshore, is like, okay,
mm,
I wanted to invest a little bit of time up front to understand
mm,
the culture.
mm,
And as I began to
mm,
understand that culture, I
mm.
began to, okay, here's how I need to tweak my leadership approach to make
Okay.
this relationship work
Interesting.
very well.
Very interesting. Yeah, yeah. And what did you do to bridge that culture? So of course you tweaked your leadership style, but what are the things that you had to adjust in terms of bringing them on board?
Yeah, so what we did is we created what we call a onboarding plan for every new
Mm,
person where I literally mapped out for the first
okay.
45 days on the job.
Mm,
I knew
mm,
I had an idea of what they were
Hmm.
going to be doing every day for the first 45 days. And
Okay.
a lot of that involved, hey, we were
Hmm.
going to hop on and we were going to do a daily check in,
Hmm.
daily review
Hmm.
meeting. And
Hmm.
of course, the first ones was really about, okay, them getting to know
Hmm.
the company, me getting
Hmm.
to know them, and then also
Hmm.
them getting to know me. And I
Hmm.
think investing that time up front of getting to
Hmm.
know people, and I
Hmm.
would also ask about,
Hmm.
tell me about like your prior work experience. How did you
Okay.
guys work with your manager in the past? Or
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
is it like in, when you're working in, your home country with a manager
Hmm.
there? And as
Hmm.
I began to ask those questions, I began to learn a lot about how their
Hmm.
work culture was, and then
Hmm.
where things were different. Because in a lot of times in other countries, like, you do exactly what your manager tells you to do. And
Right.
so I had to work with my team to tell them is that, hey, in this environment, I want
Hmm.
you to have some independence on some of the
Sure.
decisions that you make.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
there would be questions that they would then come to me and say, hey, well, what should I do
Hmm.
here? And then I would
Hmm.
have to slowly transition it to say, okay, all right, what do you think you should do? And then
Yeah.
we would
Very
walk
good.
down their ideas
Hmm.
to kind of
Hmm.
help them get a little bit more comfortable making
Hmm.
decisions on their own. And I think that took, I mean, it took some months for
Hmm.
that to really, set in. And I think
Hmm.
after we probably got about 3 employees on the team, I think we had
Hmm.
enough people in
Hmm.
the Philippines to where when we would hire a new person on, the 3
Hmm.
people we already had on the team could then help introduce them to
Onboard.
the new
Hmm.
culture of our company.
Very good. Yeah, very smart. So I think a lot of investment goes in terms of bridging the culture, because if you hire somebody in US, it is pretty fast. But then when you hire somebody from India, Philippines, it takes time to kind of bring them up to the speed and your cultural thinking. So it's a lot of investment, but I'm sure there'll be a lot of savings as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it is a ton of savings. I mean, because I think when
Mm,
you're looking at an offshore strategy compared to the
mm,
US, I mean, you're looking
mm.
anywhere from like,
I
you
love
know,
this, offshore strategy. Most of the people, they feel that offshore is a stopgap arrangement, So if I'm not getting here, let me look out for that. But yeah, let's talk little more about this offshore strategy, So
Mhm.
I love the way you
Absolutely.
see things, Yeah.
Absolutely, because I looked at it as it was a strategic move for us. I think
Mm,
operationally, one of the
mm,
issues we were running into is like I looked at if I because we tried having some contractors that we
mm,
tested out here in the
mm,
US. And what I
mm,
realized is with them working in the US, while I was trying to meet with clients and do new
mm,
sales deals,
mm,
they
mm.
had questions for me during the daytime. And I was like,
Okay.
I can't do
Mm,
both at the same time. So
mm,
going with an offshore strategy is our team, when they work in their daytime, it's my evening. So during the day, my time, I could focus on meeting with clients and doing sales activity. And then in the evenings, I could meet with the team. And plus, it allowed us to have more, almost 24-hour around the clock work being done.
mm,
Because if our client came to me with a request at 4:30 p.m., I could then hand it to my offshore team when they came in
mm.
and worked their hours. So first thing in the morning, that client now has that answer back in their email.
Wow.
And for clients, it was like, wow, that was pretty fast.
Yeah.
And I think it
Yeah.
was because we were strategic about
Mm,
hiring
mm,
team members in different time zones. And I think
mm,
for us, that's what made us realize that offshoring was a strategy, not
mm.
necessarily a, hey, I just can't find anybody. We'll just use,
Yeah.
offshore
Mm,
as a stopgap. And I think it's
mm.
actually a really strategic move to your business.
Yeah, yeah. So it's fantastic, So very, very few people I've seen that, so they feel that, working with a different time zone is a challenge. You have put this as an advantage to you, in terms of turning around, deliverables with your client, and then, scheduling your day. So that gives you enough opportunity to go market sell, It's a brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, it's part of the reason why I think, as you mentioned earlier, like why we began to develop a public
Mm,
brand is because
mm,
during the day, I could spend
mm.
more time
Yeah.
doing marketing, business
Mm,
development. And then when
mm,
the team comes in the evening,
mm,
we can
mm,
then crank through and get the work done. And I mean,
mm,
because to be honest, it's not like
mm.
our clients are like constantly calling us during the day.
Sure. Yeah.
So I can
Mm,
focus on either
mm,
maybe I have,
mm,
1 to 2 meetings with clients a day. The
mm,
rest of the
mm.
time I can focus on either marketing, business development, or I'm
Sure.
looking at kind of our staff planning to say, okay,
Mm,
all right,
mm,
let
mm,
me every month we do an assessment on everybody's skill. So I know, okay, all right,
mm,
where do I need to spend more
mm.
time with this person or this staff
Sure.
member to help
Mm, mm,
them, get up to
mm,
speed? Like,
mm,
say about maybe 5 months ago, we
mm,
promoted one of our senior accountants in the
mm,
Philippines to the accounting
mm,
manager. And
mm,
so I knew that I needed to spend some time with her to
mm,
get her
mm,
comfortable being the
mm,
accounting manager. Now
mm,
she can do a
mm.
lot of the training and she can answer
Sure.
a lot of the questions for
Mm,
the accounting
right.
staff, which then
Mm.
frees up my time to do more
Yeah.
other things for the firm.
Yeah. And they can do in their time zone. So, you are not
Yep.
disturbed. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's great. And do you use any tools or, or any piece of tech for managing the clients, or as you said, skill sets rating or something?
Yeah, so I think from a management standpoint, we that was probably another hurdle. Like once we
Mm,
figured out,
mm,
how to get
mm,
clients, we figured out
mm,
how to get the right staff, and
mm,
then we figured out, okay, how are you going to manage the staff? And
mm.
we probably stayed trying to manage our processes through spreadsheets way too long.
Okay.
and, and I, and I think we had to really say, all right, we needed to upgrade to a practice management tool. So we
Mm,
went with using Canopy because we were
mm,
like, we got to get more organized about how we're
mm,
managing, who's
mm.
handling what responsibilities, what tasks
Right.
are being done. And
Mm,
so
mm,
we transitioned to that practice management tool. And it
mm,
was great because it then
mm,
allowed me to not have to spend
mm,
as much time with the team because the
mm,
practice
mm,
management tool could lay out like, hey, here's
mm.
what you need to get done today. Here's what
Sure.
some of the
Mm,
key deadlines are. And
mm,
so
mm,
we ended up using a practice management tool. We
mm.
also implemented using Live Flow, which was a reporting
Okay.
tool, because I'd say
Mm,
all of our clients are in QuickBooks. And so
okay.
we
Mm,
use the tool Live Flow to pull data
mm,
directly into
mm,
spreadsheets.
mm,
So we could
mm,
create a lot of the formulas, the custom reporting that we needed. And that
mm,
allowed the team to move a
mm,
lot faster because not
mm,
everyone we hired had
mm.
extensive, experience with writing formulas, creating things from
Sure.
scratch.
Mm,
So by
mm,
using an integrated tool with spreadsheets,
mm,
we could
mm,
automate a lot of that process, which then
mm,
allowed our team to get up to
mm.
speed faster.
Yeah. Yeah. And do your offshore team also front ends the client? Uh, they talk to the client, or they do non-verbal communication. So what's that?
Yeah, so I will say what was funny is that was a little bit of a journey because I remember
Yeah.
the very first person I hired told me
Mm.
they were like,
Huh.
I'm very eager to help to do anything, but they were like, but please don't ask me to speak directly with the client.
Okay.
And I
Mm.
said, "Okay, we'll
Uh,
live with it." Now, I would
uh,
say 2.5, 3 years later, now
mm.
they have no problem speaking with the client, and I think it was just
Okay.
helping them get to the point of being comfortable. So, like,
Yeah.
now,
Mm.
like, we've set up a process where the
Mm.
team, like, they're at the end of the month, they're
Mm.
sending, monthly reports. They're also
Okay.
sending, like, weekly updates. They're
Mm.
sending emails to check in with
Mm.
the team.
Mm.
So they've taken over more of the communication directly with the client. And for us,
Okay.
I had to set up a strategy for, okay, over
Mm.
time, how would I
Mm.
transition more of the communication in their
Mm.
hands? And
Mm.
it took some time to get there, but the
Sure.
team now does handle, I would say they
Mm.
probably handle about 70% of the communication with clients,
Sure.
whether
Mm.
that be via, Slack with instant message
Mm.
or whether that be via
Mm.
email or even
Sure.
sometimes
Mm.
text message as well. And
Right.
we kind of developed a strategy, and it's the benefit of
Hmm.
working within a
Hmm.
niche area is a
Hmm.
lot of the questions that we know
Hmm.
that lawyers have and law firms have
Hmm.
is we were
Hmm.
able to build it into our
Okay.
reporting, and then
Okay.
we were able to
Hmm.
automate it, so
Hmm.
the amount of questions our clients have dramatically gone down.
Reduced. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. And do you follow any particular rhythms of meeting your team, like daily, weekly, monthly? What it looks like?
Yeah, so right now I spend a lot more time on the marketing team, and so
Hmm.
we have a weekly team meeting for the marketing
Hmm.
team, and then so I
Hmm.
have 3 people on my marketing team. So we have
Hmm.
a weekly team meeting of all 4 of us get together, and then
Hmm.
I do one-on-one meetings
Hmm.
throughout the week, so like every other
Hmm.
week with the
Hmm.
team. And then
Hmm.
on the accounting team, now that we
Hmm.
have the accounting manager in place and we have, a more
Hmm.
structure there, is
Hmm.
I meet with the accounting manager once a week,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then I may hop in on like the accounting manager does a daily huddle with the
Okay.
accounting team every day,
Hmm.
and I may
Hmm.
hop in like once or twice a week,
Okay.
and because the accounting manager is able and sufficient enough to be able to handle that without
Sure.
me.
Yeah. Great. That's great. Okay. Terrell, let's move to another subject. So, when you have started, of course, with the legal firm, it would be more about accounting and stuff like that. So, how did you move to cash, or how did you move to advisory? And what were some of the challenges that you faced over there?
Yeah, I think it was, I guess you would call it like a natural progression in the life cycle of
Hmm.
when your first clients come to you because they're like,
Hmm.
I don't know what's going on with my
Hmm.
numbers or the finance
Hmm.
side. So we do the
Hmm.
bookkeeping, we clean that up.
Hmm.
And then the next
Hmm.
question is, okay, now that I
Hmm.
have these, clean financials, how does
Hmm.
this impact my decision making? And I think that's
Right.
where we saw an
Hmm.
opportunity to say, hey,
Hmm.
that's where we
Hmm.
can start to step into advisory of
Hmm.
how do I
Hmm.
help you use this information
Hmm.
to make
Hmm.
forward looking decisions like, can you
Hmm.
afford to hire? How much should you
Hmm.
invest in your marketing? And
Okay.
what types of, profitability targets should you be aiming for? And so
Hmm.
when we started hearing those questions, that's where we
Hmm.
started really saying, okay, all right, we're ready to do CAS work. And I think
Hmm.
because we had our processes for bookkeeping pretty solid,
Hmm. Hmm.
we were able to really start stepping in to offer that to clients to say, hey, we
Hmm.
we really enjoy doing the bookkeeping, and I think this is very helpful. But what we started
Hmm.
to do is said, hey, we're starting to see some trends in your numbers. We also
Hmm.
offer an advisory service where we can dive
Hmm.
into the details a little bit more, and we can
Hmm.
meet and we can tell you
Hmm.
about things that we're
Hmm.
seeing and help you
Hmm.
strategize. And that
Hmm.
opened the door for us to start doing more
Hmm.
advisory work.
Hmm. Sure. And didn't client come to you saying that, hey, look, you are doing bookkeeping, you are advising me. Why don't you do my tax as well?
So we have had a lot of people ask that question
Okay.
about we've even had
Hmm.
some clients come to us and say like they've left reviews for us and like you guys are great. The only thing that would make you
Uh,
better is if you do our taxes. And, and so and so what we've done to kind of resolve that is I'm consistently speaking at different accounting conferences, and a lot of
hmm.
times I'm developing relationships with firms that do focus on tax work as
Excellent.
good
Hmm.
partners that we can refer people
Hmm.
to.
Hmm.
And so we can tell our clients like, hey, we could do tax work, but to be honest with you,
Hmm.
our best value
Hmm.
is the
Hmm.
bookkeeping and the advisory work. But I do
Sure.
know
Hmm.
other tax firms that can
Hmm.
really solve that. And I think,
Hmm.
the good thing for us is lawyers
Hmm.
tend to understand that well
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
lawyers kind of live through that in their own business because you have some
Hmm.
lawyers who focus on, malpractice. You have some
Hmm.
lawyers who focus on intellectual property, some that
Right.
focus on like family law or criminal
Hmm.
defense. And so
Right.
conceptually, they understand that yes,
Hmm.
you may be an accountant, but there are different
Hmm.
types of accountants and they're
Right.
comfortable with that. And so it's
mm,
been, I think, because of our client base, they've
mm,
understood when I tell them, "Hey, that's not what we specialize in." And,
mm,
they don't feel bad about it, or it doesn't look bad to them because they're like, "Yeah, if they're
mm,
a family law attorney, if somebody
mm,
came with a immigration case, they're like,
mm.
yeah, we probably refer that out as well, even
Right.
though it still
Mm,
is legal work."
mm,
So I
mm.
think that's been very helpful. And
Sure.
and one of the things that I've said is the only
Mm,
way we would be able to take on tax work is if we
mm.
had a partner in the firm that really
Right.
wanted to own it, because
Yeah.
taxes, I
Mm,
understand it as a
yeah.
CPA, but it's not
Yeah.
something that I'm deeply studying
Yeah.
and
Mm,
staying up to
mm.
date on.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. And now that you are scaling your have a settled offshore team and stuff like that, so I see you spend a lot of time on the digital side of it, creating content, right? So, and you started content pretty early, to and that helped you to gain the business. So tell us, we see a lot of interesting content that you generate and the videos and the kind of stuff that you do. So where you get these ideas from?
So, what's very funny is a lot of times when we're thinking about, content early on, it was
Mm,
just me, either interviewing someone
mm,
or
mm,
me looking and saying, sitting in front of a camera like this, and like,
uh,
here are three
mm,
things you need to know about your finances. And it
uh,
was pretty, I'd say more of the technical things of what they needed to understand. But I think
mm,
as we started to bring people on the marketing team, I
mm,
specifically looked for people who didn't
mm.
have an accounting background, people who had never
Okay.
worked for an accounting firm, because I
Mm.
wanted to do something different. And
Fresh ideas.
so, like,
Mm,
our content editor, the one who edits the videos,
mm,
has never
mm,
worked with an accounting firm before.
mm, mm,
Our content writer
mm,
used to write scripts for
mm.
television shows in Kenya,
Okay.
and she
Okay.
knew nothing about accounting. And I'm like, "You're the
Okay.
perfect person for the job, because this is going to force us to actually
Mm,
be different and to try
yeah.
different things." And even
Mm,
the marketing manager, she had never
mm,
worked for an accounting firm before either. And so I was like, this is perfect, because I want to take ideas that are working in other industries and figure out,
yeah.
how do we bring it to the accounting industry? And
Very,
we
very
started
smart,
testing.
Terrell. Very, very smart.
And
And in
so
fact,
we
yeah, and in fact, the innovation also works, because people get bored seeing the same kind of stuff, right? So we
Mhm.
see your videos it's very, very interestingly created.
Yeah, it definitely was. Like I said, it took some time, and I think it was one of the things that we were having a marketing meeting once, and my
Mm.
marketing manager has a 6-year-old daughter, and
Okay.
her 6-year-old daughter came to her and was like, "Mommy, when are you going to get a real job?" And she's like, "Well, what do you mean?" She's like, "Well, it seems like all you do is sit and watch Mr. Terrell's videos." And
She
she's
was
like,
saying that that's my job.
and she was like, "Mommy, it's like you're either watching Terrell's videos or you're looking at stuff on TikTok or YouTube." And she was like, "This is part of my job of us finding new ideas."
Mm. That's pretty cool.
And
She must be feeling
yeah.
that's a cool job to have, yeah.
And I think part of it also is we spent a lot of time, like, really
Mhm,
researching,
mm,
using social media and researching,
mm,
like, what
mm,
are our ideal clients, what are the types of things that they pay attention to. And I think
okay.
even when I
Mm,
would go to conferences and have
mm,
the chance to just sit down and talk to lawyers, and not
mm,
necessarily because I was trying to win their business, is
sure.
I just,
Yeah,
was hanging out with them and wanting to
yeah.
understand, what do they
Mm,
like, what
mm,
do they not like.
sure.
And a lot
Mm,
of them instead of talking about work, they would tell
mm,
me
mm,
stories about their kids and their family,
mm,
or they would tell me
mm,
stories about a vacation that they went on, or
mm,
this thing that happened, or and
mm,
as I started listening, and I was like,
mm,
how do we create content that actually
mm,
incorporates the things that they care about? Because
mm,
most of
mm,
the people that we meet, like, they
mm,
don't
mm,
wake up every single day and say, "Hey, my one goal in
mm,
life is to work
mm,
hard in my business every
mm,
day." I mean,
mm,
a lot of
mm.
times it's other things that they care about, like,
Right,
trying a new recipe, or it's,
right. Mm,
doing a play date with their kids, or a date
mm,
night with
mm,
their spouse,
mm.
or,
Sure.
going on this trip that they want to go on. And so we
Mm,
said, all right,
mm,
how do we take the things that people
mm,
care about outside of work,
mm,
and how do we
mm,
bring that into our content to make things
mm,
a little more interesting and to get
mm,
creative? And so, we've had a lot of fun creating
mm,
content, but then
mm.
also still staying on message, because I'm
Yeah,
like, there's a way that we can still bring accounting and finance in
yeah.
with these
Mm,
creative ideas. And I think
mm,
it's been really, really good, because we've had
mm,
a lot of people interested in our content,
mm.
and it's been
Yeah,
fun for us to continue making
yeah.
it.
Yeah, interesting. So, a lot of people, the firm owners, who's watching this podcast would like to know that, how a lot of people are thinking about the digital presence and they know the importance of it, but they are not able to take that first step. So, what is your advice to, get them started, how they should start?
Yeah, I think I started off, I mean, even before I was doing video, I started off
Hmm.
writing a blog. And I
Okay.
think, we sometimes undervalue the
Hmm.
benefit of taking time to write something out,
Right.
because
Hmm.
I enjoyed the
Hmm.
writing before I
Hmm.
ever started creating videos. I would
Hmm.
just pick a finance concept and I would
Hmm.
write like
Hmm.
a very short blog about it.
Hmm.
And what it
Hmm.
did is it trained me to clarify
Hmm.
my own thoughts,
Hmm.
because I will
Hmm.
say it is very difficult to get on camera and start talking into a
Hmm.
camera if you're not
Hmm.
clear on your
Hmm.
thoughts. And so I
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
by starting off doing some
Hmm.
writing, whether that's writing a blog or
Hmm.
whether that
Hmm.
is on social media, you can
Okay.
grab you can actually,
Hmm.
you don't even have to have a picture, an image.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
just write, here's the topic,
Sure.
here's what my thoughts
Hmm.
are on this topic.
Okay.
And I think
Hmm. Hmm.
as you get in the
That will be,
habit of
yeah.
expressing
Hmm.
yourself in writing,
Sure.
it
Hmm.
helps you develop to you can get to a point to maybe doing an audio, or then
Okay.
eventually maybe doing video. But I
Hmm.
think, a lot of people underestimate
Hmm.
how
Hmm.
how valuable writing still is. Like, a lot
Right.
of people still do read
Hmm.
things online. Like, a lot of the
Right.
content that we put out,
Hmm.
even
Hmm.
though the videos may be very,
Hmm.
very interesting, the
Hmm.
some of the posts that
Hmm.
really do the best for us have actually been where I took an image of something, and then I
Okay.
wrote a thoughtful,
Okay.
some thoughtful
Hmm.
comments to the post.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
sometimes those are the things that perform better than the
Sure.
videos. And so I think
Okay.
there is
Hmm.
value in written content.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe you are able to express the best and, a little more
Mhm.
as compared to video, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Absolutely. And
that's
I will
that.
say,
Hmm. Hmm.
video does take a lot of work.
Yeah.
It takes
Yeah.
a lot of work to create a
Yeah.
lot of video content. And
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
always tell people, if you're just starting out, like,
Hmm.
written content is probably the
Hmm.
easiest and the
Easiest to
fastest for
start with.
you to
Hmm.
create.
Hmm. Right. 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 And how large is your marketing team?
So it is four of us in total. Mhm.
Okay. Hmm. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So pretty interesting, So Terrell, coming to so as a founder, right? And you have now created a business, you have created a niche, and you have so many people, and now you have a marketing engine going. So so as a founder, what are your thoughts on the leadership? How do you lead this versatile team and making sure that they are on the job, because you said that you don't much spend time on accounting, but you may be spending time on what's next.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it for me, it was at that shift of just making sure that, I think first thing was I help build the team's confidence so that they're
Mm,
confident that they can do the work without me
mm,
having to hold their hand in doing it.
okay.
And
Mm,
I think that one
mm,
is a little bit of a journey because when you're
mm,
trying to help build the confidence
mm,
of the team, it's like
mm,
you got to kind of let go of some decisions. And so for
mm,
me, it was,
mm,
finding what were some decisions that I could let go of and
mm,
then let the team make a decision on it. And even
mm,
sometimes like the team will come to me about
mm,
like, hey, I
mm,
think this client needs to understand, how depreciation doesn't impact their
mm,
cash flow. And I'm like,
mm,
well, I could tell you how to do it, but
mm,
instead, what I would do is I would say, hey,
mm,
I was like, you create a proposal on how you think we should explain that. And if they
okay.
didn't have an idea, I would say, well, go
Mm,
to Chat GPT, explain
mm,
the situation, and don't
mm,
put don't put confidential information in there. Just explain the
right.
situation
Mm,
and ask
mm,
ChatGPT to help you come up with an idea. And
mm,
then what they would do is come bring that idea and present it back to me. And I would,
mm,
most of the time, I would usually say, that sounds like
sure.
a good thing we should try. So go ahead
Mm,
and try
mm,
it, even if it
sure.
wasn't exactly how I
Yeah,
would do it. But
yeah,
it,
yeah.
it helped build their confidence. And
Confidence,
so
yeah.
for me, I
Mm,
think
mm,
as a leader,
mm,
one of my
mm,
things is to help build my team's confidence so they're confident
mm,
to work without me having to hold their hand. The other thing I
mm,
think is giving them honest feedback. And so
mm,
since I'm not doing the work, we built
mm,
in, review processes. Like one of the
mm.
things we do with our accounting team is we do a monthly financial assessment for every member on the
Okay.
team. So we'll say,
Mm,
hey, we pick one client that you work on. We'll do a
mm,
Zoom meeting. And in that
mm.
meeting, their job is to present the financials to me as if I were the client.
For a
And
client.
I'm going
Very
to
good.
ask
Mm,
questions. And it gives them a chance to feel comfortable about, hey, well, these are the types of questions a client would ask. And then
mm,
if there's something they get stuck on, then I know, okay, all right, that's something we probably need to revisit in our training. And so when we
mm.
started doing those types of assessments, it gave me the comfort of knowing like, hey, they
Mm,
understand how to handle these different questions that are coming up. I feel more comfortable not being in the details because they've proven that they can do this without me. Or if
mm.
there is an area that they're struggling in, I know, hey, we can develop a training plan to say, hey,
Right.
here's how we're going to work on this together. And I think with the accounting team, what we do is we have a twice a month we do what I
Mm,
call a accounting training where
okay.
we pick a
Mm,
common issue that is happening and or
okay.
we'll pick something new like, hey,
Mm,
this tool has a new AI feature that'll help improve our
mm,
accounting process. So during that
mm,
meeting, we pick
mm,
one person on the accounting team. Their
mm,
job is to come to the meeting and train the
mm.
rest of us on how to use that tool. And
Okay.
so as we start doing things like that, we
Mm,
not only get them comfortable, but we also get them comfortable helping each other. And I think
mm,
as we develop that culture,
mm, mm,
it helped me feel more comfortable stepping out of the details, but
mm.
also being there to support them as a leader as they
Yeah.
continue to grow and they continue to develop.
Yeah. Yeah. At FinSmart also, we keep doing this. Most of our engagement managers and team leaders, have this session because the way the accounting industry is growing, the AI is happening, there are new tools and technology coming. It has become more like an essential thing to do, right? So, get the team
Absolutely.
exposed to the newer things. Yeah. So you have a you're a pretty cool leader doing all latest kind of a stuff. And so where did you pick this all leadership styles from? What was your
Yeah,
previous
so
experience?
I would say, I've been fortunate to be around some really good leaders. Now,
Mm,
I've, in my career, I've worked for some leaders who probably
mm,
weren't the best leaders.
mm,
But I've had the experience of being able to look back and say there are some really good
mm,
leaders that
mm,
I think really played a big role in my development. And
mm,
so I would say from the time I worked from Fortune 100 companies, some of those times where it was the leader paying enough attention to me to be able
mm,
to say like, hey, I think Terrell's ready to kind of step out and do
mm,
this thing on his own. And
mm,
I remember, like, them challenging me in some areas and them kind
okay.
of paying enough
Mm,
attention to me to know when to step in. And I
mm,
remember when I worked for General Electric at one point,
okay.
and
Mm,
I remember they used to do these, all hands finance team
mm,
meetings, and
mm,
the
okay.
CFO of the division would
Mm,
come in, and the leadership.
mm,
And I
mm,
remember sitting down at
mm,
lunch with
mm,
the CFO of the division, and I
mm,
remember just asking him some questions, and he pointed
mm,
out some things, and he said, "Hey, if there's
mm,
ever anything you need
mm,
some perspective on, feel free to
mm,
let me
mm,
know." And
mm,
I emailed him once, and now he was the CFO of a at the time it was about like what $30 billion. So he was CFO for a
oh, okay.
$30 billion business division.
Mm, mm,
And I had
mm,
emailed him and said, "Hey, I'm looking for some good books to learn
mm,
this, this, and
mm,
this." And he
mm.
emailed me back and he sent a
Oh,
list of, "Hey,
wow.
here's some books that
Oh,
I've
wow.
read."
Yeah.
And so
Mm,
I think having people who were willing to,
mm,
go that extra step to point me in the
mm,
right direction. And
mm,
so I went back and I started reading some of those books, and I
mm,
took some of the advice. And so
mm,
as I became a leader in my own firm, I thought about, like,
mm,
what are all the
mm.
good experiences that I've had
Sure.
along the way? And
Mm,
how do I replicate those things? And
yeah.
then also I'm consistently, like, listening to
Mm,
podcasts on leadership, or
mm,
I am reading books about,
mm,
leadership and how to communicate and how to manage a
mm.
team, because
Sure.
I learned early on that, being a good leader is about
Mm,
continuing to grow
mm,
and being
mm.
honest, and then being able to share that
Yeah.
growth journey with the people.
Mm,
Because I think at the end of the day, as a leader, if
mm.
you want people to follow you, you have to be
Right.
leading them somewhere. Like, there has to
Yeah.
be somewhere
Yeah.
you're taking them. And so for
Yeah.
me, is I challenge
Mm,
myself to say, "Hey, Terrell,
mm,
if you're not
mm,
continuing to grow and move to the
mm,
next level of
mm,
your own
mm,
performance, guess what? You're
mm.
not giving people something to follow."
Yeah, that's great. And I think, as we move, up the ladder in terms of leadership, and um, being accessible is the, so valuable. As you said, the that CFO was running a $30 billion company, but even if you wrote a mail, he wrote you back, right? So
Mhm.
he was really approachable and accessible to you, to the even the most juniorest people, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, so that's great. So, Terrell, what do you think now? With the changes that are coming, a lot of stuff. I know you are on the forefront of all the changes that's happening with technology, with AI, with QuickBooks. A lot of AI agents and stuff like that building. So, where do you see the profession going? Maybe in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I think the profession is about to get even more interesting and more valuable, because
Mm,
I think the AI, the tools, the technology, the processes, they're able to address some of the things that used to really drain our time.
mm,
I
mm,
mean, because there are a lot of nuances when it comes
mm,
down to
mm,
accounting, but I think the tools can really address some of
mm,
those nuances. Because I would say, in my opinion,
mm,
I think it's been unfortunate that many US based firms, many US based companies have
mm,
in the past looked at offshore teams as all the stuff we don't want to do in the US, give it to the offshore team. But
mm,
I think what it's done is blinded us to being able to see the real
mm,
value that offshore
mm,
teams can provide. And
mm,
so for us, I'm excited because the
mm.
AI then gets to take away some of the
Yeah.
mundane work. And
Mm,
then
mm,
we really get to utilize the true
mm.
skill set of our offshore team at a higher
Yeah.
level of performance. And so
Right.
I think what's going to happen in the industry
Mm,
is everyone is going to get the chance to spend
mm,
more time doing the
mm,
things that
mm,
are really valuable for our clients. And that
mm.
includes the US based team, that
Yeah.
includes your
Mm,
offshore teams. And I think
mm,
it's a great opportunity for us to really
mm,
prove to our clients
mm,
we can
mm,
really be a valuable partner in
mm,
the decisions they make, a valuable partner in their
mm,
businesses. And I
mm,
think also it's going to allow us to really free up some of our time, because I mean,
mm.
the accounting industry has historically been a very draining profession to
Yeah.
work in. And I think it's
Yeah.
because all of
Hmm.
those back end nuances that used to drain
Hmm.
our time and our energy, we'll be able to
Hmm.
use technology
Do-
to address some of
yes.
those things. So
Hmm.
then we can get a little bit more of our work life balance back while still
Right.
being able to add more value.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So, Cheryl, that's nicely summed up, And as we are coming to the end of this podcast, we have really stretched our time, but the conversation was such an engaging that I couldn't resist asking so many things. So, one final question. So, your piece of advice to all the, accountants who are dreaming big and want to scale more. So, what do you want to say?
Yeah, so I would say two-part thing. The first thing I think is if you wanna, you wanna scale and you wanna grow, is you definitely need to work on yourself as a leader, because you're not gonna be able to handle the growth and you're not gonna be able to handle the scalability that your firm needs if you
Hmm.
don't grow as a leader. So I think you
Hmm.
definitely want to invest the time, whether that's listening to podcasts, reading books, attending
Hmm.
conferences, getting around other leaders and learning about, what are the things that they're seeing and doing at that leadership
Hmm.
level. The second
Hmm.
thing that I would say, and I speak on this a lot at different conferences, when it comes
Hmm.
down to offshoring or outsourcing, is to think about it strategically. Is don't just look
Hmm.
at outsourcing as, hey, this is a place where I can dump the stuff that I don't want to do or all the
Hmm.
mundane
Hmm.
activity, but
Hmm.
is to
Hmm.
start looking at it as a strategic way for you to
Hmm.
better serve your clients.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you can go back to some of the things that I said earlier in this
Yeah.
episode,
Hmm. Hmm.
where I explained it a little bit more. But I think to think
Hmm.
strategically about your
Right.
outsourcing and offshoring staffing strategies.
Hmm. That's great. So thank you so much, Terrell. It was really, really engaging conversation, and yeah, you spoke about everything right from your digital journey to creating a niche to advisory, how to be remain, how to climb mountains in the tax season, maybe. Your leadership, the future of accounting, pretty much, such a broad gamut. Thank you so much for being here with us on this Smart Outsourcing Talks, and we'll figure out a way to have you somewhere else as well. So as we are looking to start a series of webinar, and I'll be happy to invite you over there as well. So thank you for spending so much of a time with us, and we have overshooted the time, but the conversation was so engaging that I couldn't resist myself. Thank you.
Well, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks. Bye bye. Yes, Devkanya.